girl who lived in my spare room for 3 months turned out to be worth more than my entire neighborhood combined. But that's not even the crazy part. The crazy part is how she saved my daughter's life while I was busy thinking she was some kind of criminal. Before we dive in, tell us where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. My name is Blake Morrison, and I'm a 34-year-old single dad trying to raise my 8-year-old daughter Indira on a mechanic's salary here in Toledo, Ohio. 2 years ago, my wife Vanessa died in a car accident, and since then, it's just been me and my little girl against the world. I work at Patterson's Auto Repair downtown, coming home every night with grease under my fingernails and barely enough money to keep the lights on. When I posted that ad for a roommate, I thought I was just trying to make ends meet. I had no idea I was about to meet someone who would turn our entire world upside down in the best possible way. Her name was Celeste Thorne, and she showed up at my door looking like any other broke college student with a backpack and a story about needing affordable housing near the University of Toledo. For 3 months, I watched this girl eat ramen noodles and shop at thrift stores, all while my gut kept telling me something wasn't adding up. The way she spoke, the things she knew, the expensive phone calls she thought I couldn't hear. I started thinking she was involved in something dangerous, maybe even illegal. I was so focused on protecting my daughter from what I thought was a threat that I almost missed the miracle sitting right at my kitchen table. Because here's the thing about Celeste that I didn't know until it was almost too late. She wasn't just any college student. She was the heir to a billion-dollar empire, living in my spare room by choice, paying me rent with crumpled $20 bills while having access to more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But more importantly, she was about to become the guardian angel my family desperately needed, just when we needed her most. This is the story of how a girl who had everything taught me what it really means to have nothing to lose, and how sometimes the person you think you're helping is actually the one who ends up saving you. Let me paint you a picture of where my life was 2 years after losing Vanessa. Every morning, I'd wake up at 5:30 a.m. to the sound of my alarm, not because I was eager to start the day, but because that's what you do when you're the only parent left. The house felt different without her laughter filling the hallways, without her terrible singing coming from the kitchen while she made pancakes on Sunday mornings. Our little 2-bedroom house on Maple Street isn't much to look at from the outside. Built in the 1960s, white siding that could use a fresh coat of paint, a front porch where Vanessa used to sit with her morning coffee. But it was ours, and more importantly, it was where Indira felt safe. The living room still had the couch where we'd curl up for movie nights, and Indira's artwork covered the refrigerator like colorful bandages trying to hold our broken family together. The spare room, though, that was the hardest part of the house to deal with. It used to be Vanessa's art studio, where she'd disappear for hours working on her paintings. Canvases stacked against the walls, brushes soaking in mason jars, the smell of acrylic paint permanently embedded in the carpet. After the accident, I couldn't bring myself to change anything. For months, I'd walk past that closed door and pretend it didn't exist. Work at Patterson's Auto Repair was my refuge and my prison all at once. I'd spend 10 hours a day with my hands buried in engine parts, fixing other people's problems because it was easier than facing my own. The guys there knew not to ask too many questions when I picked up extra shifts on weekends. They understood that every oil change and brake job meant groceries for Indira, and another month we could stay in our house. But the medical bills from Vanessa's final 3 months in the hospital were like quicksand, pulling us down no matter how hard I worked. Insurance covered some of it, but not the experimental treatments we'd tried. Not the private room where Indira could visit without being scared by the other patients, not the round-the-clock nurses during those last terrible weeks. Every month, another envelope would arrive with a past due notice, and I'd shuffle the bills around like a financial shell game, paying just enough to keep the lights on and food on the table. The worst part was lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, and running numbers in my head. Mortgage payment, car insurance, groceries, Indira's school supplies, the heating bill that would spike once winter hit Ohio. I'd calculate and recalculate, always coming up short, always borrowing from tomorrow to pay for today. My sister Quinn would call every few weeks, her voice carefully casual as she offered help. "Mom and Dad have been asking about you two," she'd say, which was her way of suggesting I swallow my pride and ask for money. But I couldn't do it. Vanessa and I had always been independent, had always figured things out on our own. The idea of admitting to my parents that I couldn't provide for my daughter felt like failing her twice, first by not being able to save her mother, then by not being strong enough to carry on alone. Indira handled our situation better than I did, which broke my heart in a completely different way. She'd gotten used to generic cereal instead of the name brands, to shopping at Goodwill for school clothes, to hearing me on the phone negotiating payment plans with companies whose names she was too young to understand. But she never complained, never asked why other kids had things she didn't. Instead, she'd draw me pictures of our family, always including a stick figure with angel wings hovering above us. "Mama's watching over us, Daddy," she'd say with the matter-of-fact certainty that only 8-year-olds possess. She told me in a dream that everything's going to be okay. The decision to rent out Vanessa's studio came on a Tuesday in October when I opened the mortgage statement and realized we were 3 months behind. The house felt too big for just the two of us anyway, and that empty room had become a shrine to a life we couldn't get back. I spent an hour staring at Vanessa's easel, then carefully packed away her art supplies and posted an ad on the University of Toledo's housing website. Clean, quiet room available in family home. $400 per month plus utilities. Perfect for serious student. Respectful of family environment required. When I told Indira about the plan, her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen since before the accident. "Maybe it'll be a girl," she said, bouncing on her toes with excitement. "Maybe she'll braid my hair like Mama used to, or teach me how to paint my nails." The hope in her voice was almost too much to bear, but it also reminded me why I was doing this. Everything I did was for her, to give her the childhood she deserved despite losing her mother so young. I had no idea that within a week, a girl named Celeste would knock on our door and change everything. Celeste showed up at our door on a rainy Thursday evening, just 3 hours after I'd posted the ad online. I was helping Indira with her math homework at the kitchen table when the doorbell rang, and through the window I could see a young woman, standing on our porch with a backpack slung over one shoulder and a worn duffel bag at her feet. She looked exactly like what I'd expected from a college student response, maybe 19 or 20 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and clothes that had seen better days. Her jeans had a small hole in the knee, her sneakers were scuffed, and she clutched a folded printout of my housing ad in one hand. "Mr. Morrison, I'm Celeste Thorne. I called about the room," she said, extending her hand with a confidence that seemed oddly mature for someone her age. Her handshake was firm, her eye contact direct, and when she smiled at Indira peeking around my leg, there was something genuinely warm about it that put me at ease. "I can pay the first month up front," she continued, already reaching into her jacket pocket. "And I'm a business major at UT, so I understand the importance of reliable tenants." The way she spoke caught my attention immediately. Most college kids I knew talked fast, used slang, peppered their sentences with like and totally. Celeste spoke with the measured precision of someone much older, choosing her words carefully, but she was pulling out crumpled $20 bills from her pocket, counting them twice to make sure she had the full 400, so I figured she was just one of those serious academic types. Indira was immediately fascinated by her. "Do you like to paint?" she asked before I could stop. Her. "This used to be my mama's art room, but now it's going to be your room." "I'd love to learn," Celeste replied, crouching down to Indira's eye level. "Maybe you could teach me sometime." The first month was perfectly normal, or at least it seemed that way on the surface. Celeste was the ideal tenant. She kept her room spotless, never left dishes in the sink, and actually improved our Wi-Fi situation by upgrading to some premium package that she insisted on paying for herself. She'd study at the kitchen table in the evenings, spreading out textbooks and notebooks while Indira did homework beside her, and the two of them would chat about school and friends like they'd known each other for years. But as the weeks passed, little things started bothering me, details that didn't quite add up when I put them together. The first red flag was her eating habits. Celeste claimed to be on a tight budget, said she was working her way through college and had to watch every penny. But I'd catch her buying organic produce at the expensive grocery store downtown, the kind of stuff I couldn't afford even when I was flush. When I asked about it, she'd laugh and say she'd found it on clearance, but the receipts I accidentally saw in the trash told a different story. Then there was her laptop. She'd mentioned buying it used from another student, said it was a few years old but still worked fine for her classes. Except when she opened it at the kitchen table, I could see it was the latest model, the kind that costs more than I made in a month. The screen was pristine, no scratches on the case, and it had features I'd only seen in advertisements. The phone calls were what really started to worry me. Celeste would step out onto the back porch whenever her phone rang, speaking in what sounded like perfect French one day, fluent Spanish the next. I'd grown up in Toledo, knew plenty of people who spoke 2 languages, but 3 or 4, and the conversations always sounded intense, like business discussions rather than chats with friends or family. One evening, I heard her arguing with someone. In what might have been Italian, her voice sharp with frustration. "No, absolutely not," she said in English, probably not realizing how clearly sound carried through our thin walls. "I told you I'm handling this myself. The timeline hasn't changed." What timeline? What was she handling? The mail situation was the final straw. Letters started arriving for C. Thorne, Celeste M. Thorne, and C. M. Thornfield. When I asked about the different names, she laughed it off as clerical errors from the university, said bureaucracy was impossible to navigate. But 3 different variations seemed like more than just administrative confusion. My protective instincts kicked into overdrive. I started watching her more carefully, noting when she came and went, listening for more of those mysterious phone calls. Was she dealing drugs? Running some kind of scam? The thought of having brought danger into Indira's life made my stomach turn. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night in November. I was in my bedroom, but my window was cracked open for air, and I could hear Celeste on her usual spot on the back porch. Her voice was quieter than usual, but the words that drifted up made my blood run cold. "Father, I told you I can handle this myself. The experiment is working perfectly. These people have no idea who I am, and that's exactly how it needs to stay." Experiment. These people? I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. What kind of experiment involved living in my house, bonding with my daughter, becoming part of our daily routine? And if we were just subjects in some twisted study, what happened? When the experiment was over, I barely slept that night, staring at the ceiling and wondering what I'd brought into our home. By morning, I'd made my decision. Whatever Celeste was really doing here, whoever she really was, I couldn't risk Indira's safety for $400 a month. It was time to find out the truth, no matter what it cost us. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Celeste's voice saying, "These people have no idea who I am," and my mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. At 3 a.m., I gave up trying to rest and crept downstairs to my laptop, determined to figure out who was really living under my roof. The house was dead quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old wood settling. Celeste's door was closed, no light seeping underneath, and Indira was fast asleep in her room with her stuffed elephant tucked under her arm. I felt like a detective in my own home, and I hated every second of it. I started with the basics, typing Celeste Thorne, University of Toledo, into the search bar. Nothing came up in the student directory, which was strange since most universities listed their enrolled students publicly. Then I tried the variations from her mail. C. Thorne, Celeste M. Thorne, C. M. Thornfield. Still nothing related to college. But the third search hit something that made my heart skip. A society page from the Toledo Blade newspaper, dated just 6 months earlier, showed a photo from some charity gala downtown. The caption read, "Local business leaders gather for the annual Children's Hospital fundraiser." And there, in the background of the photo, was a young woman who looked exactly like my tenant, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was the man standing next to her, his hand protectively on her shoulder. The caption identified him as Donovan Thorne, CEO of Thorne Industries, and daughter Celeste. My hands were actually shaking as I clicked on more links. Thorne Industries wasn't just some local business. It was a multinational corporation worth billions, with headquarters in New York and offices in 12 countries. Donovan Thorne was on Forbes lists, had been featured on magazine covers, owned properties that looked like small countries, and his daughter had been living in my spare room for 3 months, paying rent with crumpled $20 bills. I printed out everything I could find. Articles about the company, photos from social events, even a profile piece about Donovan Thorne's intensely private family life that mentioned his daughter was being groomed to take over the business empire. The printer seemed impossibly loud in the quiet house, but I needed physical proof of what I was seeing. By sunrise, I had a folder full of evidence and a plan. I would confront Celeste that morning, show her what I'd discovered, and ask her to leave. The rental income would hurt to lose, but I couldn't have someone in my house who was lying about everything, especially not when Indira had grown so attached to her. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, rehearsing what I'd say. The folder sat in front of me like a weapon, and every few minutes I'd flip through it again, still unable to believe what I was seeing. The girl who helped Indira with homework and laughed at my terrible dad jokes was an heiress worth more than most small countries. At 7:30, I heard movement upstairs. Celeste's morning routine was predictable: shower, then down to the kitchen for coffee and toast before her first class. I waited, my stomach churning with nervous energy and something that felt like betrayal, though I couldn't tell if I was the one being betrayed or doing the betraying. But before Celeste made it downstairs, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Indira's school, which immediately sent panic shooting through my chest. Schools don't call at 7:45 a.m. with good news. "Mr. Morrison, this is Nancy from the Lincoln Elementary office. We need you to come to the school immediately." Indira collapsed. "During morning recess, and the paramedics are here." The folder of evidence scattered across the floor as I jumped up, knocking over my coffee mug. Nothing else mattered except getting to my daughter. I grabbed my keys and was halfway to the door when Celeste appeared at the bottom of the stairs, her hair still wet from the shower. "What's wrong?" she asked, taking in my panicked expression. "Indira's at school. Something's wrong. I have to go." The words tumbled out as I fumbled with my jacket. "I'm coming with you," she said without hesitation, grabbing her own coat from the hook by the door. "You don't have to. I'm coming." The drive to Lincoln Elementary was a blur of racing thoughts and worst-case scenarios. Celeste sat in the passenger seat, her hand gripping the door handle, and I could see genuine worry etched across her face. Whatever lies she'd told me, whatever game she was playing, her concern for Indira seemed absolutely real. We found the paramedics loading my daughter into an ambulance, her face pale and her eyes closed. The school nurse explained that Indira had been playing on the monkey bars when she suddenly grabbed her stomach and collapsed, crying about sharp pain in her right side. "We need to get her to Toledo Hospital immediately," the paramedic said. "It looks like appendicitis and we can't wait." I climbed into the ambulance with Indira, holding her small hand as the sirens wailed and the vehicle raced through Toledo traffic. Celeste followed in my truck, and for those terrifying 20 minutes, the folder of evidence and questions about experiments were forgotten. All that mattered was the little girl lying on the stretcher, the center of my entire world. At the hospital, the emergency room doctor confirmed our fears. Indira needed immediate surgery, and they needed my insurance information right away. That's when the second wave of panic hit, because I knew exactly what my bare-bones insurance policy would and wouldn't cover. The financial coordinator pulled me aside with a clipboard and a sympathetic expression that I'd seen too many times during Vanessa's illness. "Mr. Morrison, your insurance will cover the basic procedure, but there are additional costs. We're looking at about $12,000 that you'll need to pay up front before we can schedule the surgery." $12,000. I might as well have been 12 million. I sat in the waiting room, staring at the linoleum floor, making phone calls that led nowhere. My boss at the shop didn't have that kind of money to advance. My sister Quinn could maybe scrape together 1,000, but not 12. My parents lived on Social Security and had their own medical bills. Every avenue led to the same dead end. That's when Celeste found me, sitting with my head in my hands, feeling like the worst father in the world. The folder of evidence was still scattered across my kitchen floor at home, but suddenly it didn't matter who she really was. What mattered was that my daughter needed surgery, and I couldn't provide it. "Blake," she said softly, sitting down beside me. "Tell me what's happening." And for the first time since she'd moved into our house, I decided to tell her the complete truth about everything. I looked up at Celeste sitting beside me in that sterile hospital waiting room, and suddenly all my careful plans for a confrontation felt meaningless. My daughter was lying in a bed down the hall, needing surgery I couldn't afford, and here was this girl who'd been living in our house under false pretenses. But in that moment, with fluorescent lights humming overhead and the smell of disinfectant filling my nostrils, I was too exhausted and scared to be angry. "I know who you are," I said quietly, my voice cracking with exhaustion. "I spent all night researching you online. Celeste Thorne, daughter of Donovan Thorne, heir to a billion-dollar empire. I found newspaper photos, articles, everything. Her face went completely pale, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked exactly like the 19-year-old girl she actually was. Her hands started shaking, and she stared down at the floor like she was trying to disappear into it. "I was going to confront you this morning," I continued. "I was going to ask you to pack your things and leave because I thought you were dangerous. Thought you were running some kind of experiment on us. And maybe you were. I don't know anymore. But right now, I don't care about any of that. All I care about is that my little girl needs surgery, and I can't pay for it." When Celeste finally looked up, there were tears streaming down her cheeks. "You want to know about the experiment, Blake? You really want to know?" I nodded, though part of me wasn't sure I was ready for whatever she was about to tell me. The experiment wasn't about you or Indira. It was about me. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "My entire life has been controlled by my father. Every friend I've ever had was vetted by security teams. Every school I attended was chosen based on networking opportunities. Every conversation I've had has been monitored or reported back to him in some way." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, but the tears kept coming. I wanted to know what it felt like to be a normal person, to have people care about me because of who I am, not because of my bank account or my last name. So I lied about everything and moved into your spare room, paying rent with cash from my personal allowance, pretending to be just another broke college student. But why us? Why our house? Because when I read your ad, it sounded real. Not fancy, not trying to impress anyone, just honest. And when I met you and Indira that first night, I saw something I'd never experienced before. A family that actually loved each other, that took care of each other without contracts or conditions or expectations about future business arrangements. She stood up and started pacing in front of the plastic chairs, her composure completely broken. "Do you know what it's like to wonder if anyone would care about you if you lost everything tomorrow? To question whether every smile, every laugh, every kind gesture is genuine or just someone trying to get closer to your money." I wanted to stay angry at her for lying, for manipulating us, but watching her fall apart in that hospital corridor, I realized she wasn't the villain in this story. She was just a kid who'd never had what Indira and I took for granted every single day. "Living with you two has been the happiest 3 months of my entire life," she continued, "helping Indira with homework, listening to you complain about difficult customers at the shop, eating dinner together like a real family. Nobody was trying to impress me, or use me, or turn me into a networking opportunity. You just let me be Celeste." "So what happens now?" I asked. "When your father finds out where you've been?" "I called him this morning before you got the call. About Indira." She sat back down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I told him I wasn't coming back to New York, that I was staying here and finishing school at UT. He threatened to cut off my trust fund, to disown me completely. And I told him to go ahead, because I'd rather be broke and happy than rich and miserable." Before I could respond, she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. "But Blake, I still have access to my accounts until the lawyers make it official. And I want to help Indira. I can't take your money." "Why not?" "You gave me something priceless when you let me into your family. You showed me what real love looks like, what it means to put someone else's needs before your own every single day. You work 2 jobs to keep Indira safe and happy. You sleep on a couch that's falling apart because you gave her the bigger bedroom. You worry about her future more than your own. She was crying again, but her voice was steady and determined. "Let me give you something back. Let me pay for her surgery, not as Donovan Thorne's daughter, but as someone who loves that little girl like she's my own sister." "Celeste, I don't know what to say." "Say yes. Say you'll let me help the people who saved me from a life I didn't even realize was killing me slowly." I looked down the hospital corridor toward the room where Indira was waiting, scared and in pain, trusting me to fix whatever was wrong. Then I looked at this young woman who'd turned our world upside down, who'd lied about everything except the way she felt about us. "Okay," I said finally, "but not as a loan or charity. As family helping family." She smiled through her tears, the first genuinely happy expression I'd seen on her face since that first night when she'd offered to teach Indira how to paint. "Family helping family," she repeated. "I like the sound of that." 20 minutes later, the financial coordinator was processing a payment that ensured Indira would get the best surgical team in the hospital, and for the first time since Vanessa died, I wasn't carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders alone. Indira's surgery was a complete success. 3 hours after they wheeled her into the operating room, the surgeon emerged with a smile that told me everything I needed to know before he even spoke. The appendix had been removed cleanly, no complications, and my daughter would be back to climbing monkey bars within a few weeks. When Indira woke up in recovery, groggy from anesthesia but alert enough to ask for ice cream, the first thing she said was, "Where's Celeste?" Not "where's Daddy" or "am I okay," but "where's Celeste?" That told me everything I needed to know about how deeply this girl had woven herself into our lives. "I'm right here, sweetheart," Celeste said, appearing at the bedside with a stuffed elephant that was twice the size of the one Indira slept with at home. "This is Eleanor. She's going to keep you company while you get better." "Is she rich like you?" Indira asked with the brutal honesty that only 8-year-olds possess. Celeste laughed, glancing at me with an expression that was part embarrassment, part relief. "What do you think makes someone rich, Indira?" My daughter considered this with the seriousness of a philosophy professor. "Having people who love you?" "Then yes," Celeste said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm very rich." The next few months changed all of our lives in ways I never could have anticipated. Celeste officially transferred to the University of Toledo, enrolling in their business program not because her father demanded it, but because she genuinely wanted to learn how to build something meaningful. She kept renting the room, though she insisted on paying for groceries and utilities too, claiming it was only fair since she ate more than her share of my terrible cooking. The dynamic between us shifted from landlord and tenant to something that felt more like siblings. Two people who'd been through something intense together and come out stronger on the other side. She helped Indira with homework while I worked late shifts at the shop. I taught her how to change a tire and check her oil, practical skills her expensive education had somehow overlooked. We fell into a routine that felt natural, like we'd been a family of 3 for years instead of months. Donovan Thorne made exactly one attempt to retrieve his daughter. He showed up at our door on a Tuesday evening in a black town car with 2 men in expensive suits, looking like he was conducting a hostile business takeover rather than visiting his child. I watched from the living room window as Celeste walked out to meet him, her posture straight and her voice calm but firm. "I'm not coming back," I heard her say. "I'm happy here." "This is beneath you, Celeste. This house, these people, this entire charade." "No, Father, your world is beneath me. I'd rather be genuinely loved by 2 people than used by thousands." He left without saying another word to any of us, and Celeste came back inside with tears in her eyes but her head held high. "That's the last time I'll see him," she said quietly. "Are you sure?" I asked. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. 6 months later, she proved just how sure she was when she used her business education and a small portion of her trust fund to help me expand Patterson's Auto Repair. Not as a silent investor or a charity case, but as a genuine business partner who rolled up her sleeves and learned how to balance books, manage inventory, and deal with difficult customers. Morrison and Thorne Automotive opened a year after Indira's surgery in a larger building with state-of-the-art equipment and 3 additional mechanics on staff. Celeste handled the business side while I focused on what I'd always loved best, fixing things that were broken and making them run better than before. But the most important change wasn't financial or professional. It was watching Indira grow up with a big sister who taught her that family isn't just about blood relationships. Celeste showed up to every school play, helped her practice for spelling bees, and spent Saturday mornings teaching her how to paint watercolor flowers in what had once been Vanessa's art studio. "You know what I learned from all of this?" I told Celeste one evening as we sat on the front porch, watching Indira practice cartwheels in the yard. "What's that?" "Sometimes the people who need rescuing aren't the ones you think. I spent months worried that you were dangerous, that you might hurt us somehow. Turns out you were just as lost as we were, just in a different way." She smiled, that genuine expression I'd learned to recognize as her real face, not the polite mask she wore for the rest of the world. And I learned that having everything doesn't mean anything if you don't have anyone to share it with. Looking back now, 3 years later, I can see that we all got exactly what we needed from that strange arrangement. Celeste found a family that loved her for who she was, rather than what she was worth. Indira got a big sister who would move heaven and earth to protect her. And I learned that accepting help doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. The girl who had everything taught us that the most valuable things in life can't be bought, inherited, or stolen. They can only be given freely, received gratefully, and shared generously. In the end, we didn't just become roommates or even friends. We became proof that families can be chosen, that love can be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the greatest wealth comes from opening your heart to someone who desperately needs a home. That's a lesson worth more than any trust fund could ever be.